Today, we will try to speak about Russia's policy, as that is exactly what everyone is interested in nowadays. We will try to see what policy will be adopted by Russia, a state that has already appeared in our region in the territory of Artsakh. But we must admit that there isn't much you can say about Russia. All that could be said on the 150, 200 years of Russia's policy has already been said. And frankly speaking, it's hard to say anything new. But there are certain circumstances that still maintain this very same course. Firstly, how is it possible that in different eras, and now as well, the Armenians have regarded Russia as evil, as absolute evil, and a savior at the same time? Interesting, right? How is this ever possible? That's exactly what compels us to claim that many things were never truly understood by the Armenian people. And why are we witnessing an increase of interest today? The reason is that when the new myths collapse, people begin to wonder and ask themselves, what are we going to do without Russia? We must set another military base. I don't know, we need to do this, we need to do that. And the other side says that Russia is pure evil and that we must keep them away from our territory. That we have succeeded during the times when Russia has been absent from the region. And we don't have answers to these questions. And that's what makes it important to understand what is going on in the Russian policy, which sometimes chooses to obliterate Armenia and then favors supporting it. This is what truly matters. We need to understand the logic behind it to avoid possible obscure viewpoints. I have studied Russian policy a lot, for decades actually, and I have been part of various processes where Russia was making this or that decision or taking certain actions. And I will try to speak about this now. We must understand that in Russian policy, Armenia, and not just Armenia, but also Armenians with their own problems, the Armenian state, has never been an ultimate goal in the policy of the Russian Empire, the Soviet Union, or even today's Russia. It has only been a means. And this is important to understand. And what do we mean by means? A means for what? A means used to clarify the relations between the Russian Empire, the former Ottoman Empire, and today's Turkey. See how interesting this is? Merely a means. But a means of what kind? A means in certain situations, at times of problems and escalations between Russia and Turkey, and even during Russia's weakening, has been used either as an artificial danger, a danger for Turkey manufactured by Russia, or a victim of their relations. But what kind of a victim? A victim of two types. Firstly, Russia would do everything to torment Armenia when it needed it. And then they would beat us. But by whose hands? Only through the hands of the Turks. Azerbaijan fulfills the same function. It was proven already, once again, that it's Turkey's stooge. It arms them, they knock us off, and then we ask for help. They come to save us. They become our saviors. See what an interesting thing is happening here. And then, coming and resolving their problems with Turkey, they use us as political food to build new relations when they want it. This is very complex. First, a danger, then the process of victimization, and then being political food. But Russia remains forever a savior and an executioner at the same time. This is the only logic, which I believe hasn't been completely understood. This is the reason why, up until this moment, Russia, in all similar situations, is regarded either as a punitive with destructive actions or as a rescuer. And today, the way I see it, in many discussions, people keep arguing with one another. Now, was entering Artsakh a salvation or an invasion? Their officials have already said that it was a difficult endeavor and that the Karabakh issue was a difficult operation at large. As far as the relations with Turkey are concerned, our situation is very complicated, but also very productive. Collaboration is what matters. The last effort is, of course, Nagorno-Karabakh, and it is indeed a rather difficult operation. That is how I would like to call it, and in no other way. What operation is he referring to? You see, we know one fact. They came and obliterated our army, and as I've said this previously, they divided our territory among themselves. This is a classical example, you see. But when Russia had left our territory, let's take, for example, 1991. The Soviet Union was collapsing, the Russian troops were leaving, and then they showed us the support we needed. We won the war. They tried to come back in 1994, but they didn't manage to do anything. What did they do? They started to fortify the place. There surely is a reason why during the war Aliyev would keep asking where a poor country like Armenia was getting all these weapons. I believe it is clear where they came from and whose weapons they were. How else do you think this would work? We can also go back to 2018, 2020. If we look at things in this light, we will see everything quite clearly. Now, why does it follow the same algorithm for so long? Russia and Turkey are also not hanging up in the air from the political point of view. Both of them had valued relations with Europe. Europe is what they had problems with. These two empires have always been separate empires, and each of them had their own problems with Europe. Russia's problems were very clearly and rather properly studied. They used to say Russia was Europe's gendarme. Whenever there was a squabble, everybody would turn to Russia, and it would go and settle its problems, and then there either was some sort of support, or they would beat Russia down. The constant danger, the invader in the Balkans, was Turkey. This is one of the triangles, where they have problems all the time. And from this triangle emerges our own triangle, and we almost always end up, as it is said, between the Turkish anvil and the Russian hammer. As just a means. See how this mechanism works? And it has worked this way for centuries. And this is why Khachatur Abovyan's controversial words, which remained in our literature and even in the ethno-political thought in general, weren't said in vain. Blessed be the moment when the Russians set foot here. And this is what eventually led to the anvil and hammer dichotomy I just mentioned. See where this comes from? And we never got out of this. That's what's interesting. There has never been a way out of this. There have always been viewpoints that we must try, like, seeking relations with Russia, we should improve our relations with Turkey as well, That is to say, the suffocating triangle that has already turned into an iron cage would often lead people to the idea that we can try to carry out separate actions between these two. That is, to either take one side or the other side, without understanding the logic that I have already told you about, that we're just used as a means to achieve goals. Whoever you turn to, they're always going to talk between each other. And this is where the biggest share of our tragedies stems from. Even when talking about the causes of the Armenian genocide, many smart people who have been dealing with the issue for decades pose very contradicting assessments, trying to find the reasons how it happened. They wonder why it had to be so difficult. But let me tell you why. I've also taken a great interest in this, especially in the opinions of these people. Why can't they find anything here? Because it occurred in an era, perhaps quite unexpectedly. Or I don't know, perhaps such an instance had already occurred once when studying from the end of the 19th century and up until the 1915, the relations between Armenians and Turks were at their best. They loved us a lot, we lived together in peace, and everything was good. Now, what made these relations so good? Along with the Turkish parties, the newly created Armenian parties were struggling to establish a constitutional order against the Sultan in perfect unity. Then those forces came to power, the famous Young Turks. But we will not elaborate on this now. Then there was the war in 1914. And again, all the Armenian powers, the church, the public figures, said, this is our country. We need to protect it all together. Armenian, Turk, Greek. I'm talking about World War I. What happened then? They came together, sent the young men to the Ottoman army, and then we got the genocide in return. This is why a lot of people fail to understand this. There was no reason at that particular time. But see, this is what happened. That's why the fatal mistake of speaking with only one side or the other can cause serious problems for us. There's a lot of talk now, really. People say, is it possible to take Turkey separately and build relations with it? But what about those two triangles that I was talking about? Where are those going to go? The Armenian political mind hasn't found the answer yet, hasn't managed to understand in any way possible the way this scheme works, its logic, and most importantly, has not come to a conclusion to find proper mechanisms. There was also a lot of talk that we should rely on ourselves only. What does this mean? I haven't heard anything else besides that one single sentence. People often say, well, Russia isn't a good ally. Let's try and find another one, like the United States or France. How should you do this? Again, no one speaks of this, and no one can. Why? Because there are no answers to principal, important questions. To me, it's certain, and I have said this numerous times, that everything begins from a sovereign strategy. You can be in a cage, in jail, but no one can affect your strategy or your choice. This is what we lack. But let's imagine that we have it all. Imagine there has been the will, that you're really self-determined and have offered yourself a strategy to carry out. What are the principles of that strategy? This is something that I don't think any Armenian political figure has a clear idea about. My extensive studies that have been published show that we can accomplish this if we truly unite over the idea that we can have a sovereign strategy. And two principles should be put in the roots of that strategy. Restraining any outside forces, not allowing it to enter Armenia. This is the first. The second one is not having any alliance-related responsibilities. This is the only way. They can beat you for this, they can try to cunningly put you in trouble, but eventually it will affect the positions of the others. Let's not forget that there have been cases, and I just spoke of this, in 1994, for example, when a segmented, torn-up decision was made that the Russian troops must not come to Artsakh. That is not true. It would have disappeared a long time ago. This was the only thing rooted in their heads. You see? But again, we fail to understand that it's necessary to recognize the status of Nagorno-Karabakh so that the problem would have something clear and definite in terms of international relations. So that today, they wouldn't look us in the eye and say, where were you? Why didn't you recognize it? It's not yours. What are you doing here? See what it is? It's surely difficult to understand such complex things. I'll try to also show you the reasons for this in our upcoming lectures. Why didn't the Armenian political thought somehow realize this? Realize that role? Can you not see how those roles, the periodically recurrent roles that still go on, evolve? I will show you all this with examples. I'll also dig into history a bit to show you what worldview was periodically dominating among our political classes. Take, for example, the last 30 years. Next time, we will dwell on this longer, and we'll try to see how our very first authorities and those that came after them perceived the problems of Armenia, what kind of decisions they made, and how they looked at the world. And I think that after this, we will have a clearer understanding of the mechanisms that function in this malicious triangle.